Joining us on the Honky Tonk Time Machine this week, we have another incredible 90s hitmaker with us. Very happy to welcome for the first time to the show, Suzy Bogguss. Suzy, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Hey, this is such a cool show.
Well, thank you. That means a lot coming from you.
I love, anything where, there's some live content to it. I love that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we are pumped to be able to get to see you on May 13th in Marion, Illinois at the Cultural and Civic Center.
Yes, this is one of those gigs that's been on the books for 3 years, and finally we're going to get to play it. It's one of those things where I feel like, we've been canceled a time or two, and it's like, I'm ready to do this, and I'm ready to see the folks in Illinois. I'm an Illinoisan myself, so this is going to be fun.
Yeah, what can we expect at a Suzy Bogguss show? I'm ashamed to say I've not seen one.
Well, these days I travel with just a trio, so it's an acoustic thing. We don't carry drums, and I have stellar musicians. So great, lots of good harmony, lots of good picking, and hopefully some songs that some folks will recognize. I always tell people that our show is, it's okay for kids and it's okay for grandmas, and if you just want to have a family outing, we're a lot of fun, and we keep any of the distaste above people's heads so they don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to get over my head, Suzy. Again, it's happening in Marion, Illinois on May 13th. You talked about remembering the songs. I think they're going to remember the songs, Suzy. You have so many good ones. I want to get into some of those. But first, you talked about being an Illinois girl. You're from Northwest Illinois.
Right, just south of Rock Island and Moline, and just a little kind of, we're kind of a bedroom community, I think. A lot of people work in the Quad Cities, and, like my folks both worked in the Quad Cities when I was growing up. But it's a cute little town called Aledo, and they have a big rhubarb festival there every year at the beginning of June, and it's, oh my gosh, they make thousands of rhubarb pies, and it's a pretty big deal.
That sounds quaint as all get out.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
And then, so you graduated from Illinois State with a degree in metalsmithing?
Yes. Well, I have an art degree. I concentrated in gold and silversmithing. So, yeah, mostly jewelry making.
That's awesome. What kind of led you down that path?
The funny thing is that I never even thought of anything like that, but I always loved art, and so I started at Illinois Wesleyan, and I had a lot of friends from Chicago in my dorm, and they had broader experiences than I had had, and so one of my friends had taken some jewelry classes in Chicago, and she had these beautiful things to show for it, and I thought, ooh, that looks like a cool thing to do. So I transferred to Illinois State, where they had a whole jewelry studio and everything, and ended up completing that side of things for while I was also making music in the bars there as well.
I understand you went on to start designing your own jewelry and stuff like that. Do you still do that, or is that a thing of the past?
I still do it when I have time. My thing is now I end up kind of putting things together and or fixing things of mine that I have been messed up and stuff like that. So it's not like I'm actively making it for market or anything like that. But I did back in the really early 90s, I did have a little bit of jewelry that I would market.
Well, I think that's really neat, and that's something that I didn't know about you until I was, doing a little research for this interview. I thought that was really cool. Something else I learned.
It's a weird thing. I'm always worried that people think I'm out there soldering, semi trailers or shoeing horses or whatever. But it's really mostly with gold and silver.
Yeah, I pictured you in a forge somewhere, blacksmithing.
Yes, right.
Something else I learned about you is that, and you might have to elaborate on this because I don't know much about it, but what I read is that when you were a young girl, you used to visit Roy Rogers and his wife.
Right.
What was that about?
Well, my grandparents and my aunt and uncle moved to California, to a town called Apple Valley, California, and they just happened to be living neighbor-wise on a desert block with Roy and Dale. And so when I was about 12 or so, I took the train out there to visit, and my grandmother worked with Dale at the church. She was at the church auxiliary with her, and so, I went over and met them, and then they invited me back. I was my spring break from 6th grade, and they invited me back for TV dinners on their Wednesday nights, and so I got to hang out with them. It was the day before I left to go home. I went back over there it was like a Saturday morning or something like that, and I asked them if I could take a picture. And of course, they were just in their normal clothes, and Dale says, "Well, let me put my girdle and my wig on," and she did do that for me. And then so I have some really cute pictures of us together. And later on, when I won the ACM Best New Female, I had continued to go out and visit my aunt and uncle after my grandparents passed away, and so I would bump into Roy at this little place that they'd have breakfast. And the day that after I won that award, Roy was having breakfast there, and he had been at the ACMs, and he said, "Well, now, I never figured you to be a yodeler."
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun to have him, see me many years later. And, I think probably he had something to do with me learning how to yodel.
I bet so. Were they, they sound like just awesome people.
Such down to earth. Roy had a broken foot that somehow he broke it on his motorcycle, and he took off his boot, and his foot was as black as, it was just awful, black and blue, and he just had it in his boot. That's what he was using for a cast. It was just awful.
Your heyday in country music, especially on the female side of things, I loved that sound. It was kind of like a folksy sound, would be the way I would describe it. Would you agree? And if so, what were some of those influences that kind of led you down that road? Well,
definitely the folksy thing, I think, came from, where I grew up, my music teachers, and also, I was Girl Scout. I loved harmony, and I loved all that stuff. When my sister got married, she left her guitar behind, and I picked up the guitar about age 14, and that was kind of right when John Denver was having his big heyday, and there were a lot of performers that were making music that was, somewhat country and somewhat folky, and it was the kind of music that you could actually learn to play an instrument to, because the chords were pretty simple. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's just, I kind of just organically moved into that music. And my dad was a big country fan, so I listened to Merle and Willie Nelson and people like that, Eddie Arnold, when I was little. And so being able to, some of those songs I remembered from my dad's 8-tracks, I started learning those, and it just kind of led me from one thing to another.
When did you decide you were going to try it out in Music City?
Oh, God, that was much later. When I graduated college, I took off in a camper truck, and I spent about 5 years using my music to get me from one place to another in the country. I was started out in the Rocky Mountains and did a lot of street busking, where you open your guitar case and people throw tips in there. Mm-hmm. And then I bought a little PA system and started working in some of the little resort areas around the lakes in the summertime, and then around the ski resorts in the winter. And, at some point I had met enough people that I was getting some courage, and had some friends that moved to Nashville, and Well, I called him up, and by golly, the first day I got to town, I had 2 nights of work at a local rib joint, so I knew I was going to be okay. I could pay my rent, and then I started singing demos for different publishing companies, $10 a song. And then while doing that, I got a lot of kind of free experience in the studio, and how do you use the microphone and that sort of thing. Where I was actually getting paid to learn.
I've talked to a lot of artists who have had the same experience as you, as far as starting out playing at Dollywood, or at least I think when you were there, it was called Silver Dollar City, which we have a Silver Dollar City in Branson too, so we're familiar with it. But was that like your first kind of gig, was playing there?
Yeah, well, it was Silver Dollar City the first summer that I played there. They were having a music festival, and somehow I scored 3 days during that festival to play at the little train station. And believe it or not, my timing was perfect, because that was right when Dolly was there looking at the park, and she'd been contemplating buying it. So I was hired as the first female headliner at Dollywood.
Oh, cool.
The first season that it was open. So those 3 days that I did down there were pretty important to how things turned out for me.
Did you actually audition for Dolly or play in front of Dolly then to get that?
She was there. I don't know if she heard me, but somebody at once told me that she loved the fact that I sang without my shoes on. And they came to hear me at the rib joint in Nashville. The music directors came to see me there and hired me on the spot. So it was pretty weird.
That's awesome. That must have been a surreal feeling, knowing that you were at least involved in some way with Dolly Parton that early in your career.
It really, really, really was. And just the whole, I kind of, I felt like I was getting my foot in the door a little bit in Nashville, and there was a part of me that was like, is this the right thing to do? But the folks from Dollywood, assured me that I'd be opening concerts for Dolly. And I thought, oh my gosh, what would it be like to get in front of that many people? So, that first season, I was in front of, 1 million people. And that's a lot to get started. And so when the folks from Capitol Records came down to hear me at Dollywood, once again, they just offered me a contract right on the evening of, after I played 5 sets, and they just kind of hung out and did the whole Dollywood scene, and then took me to dinner that night and said, how would you like to be on Capitol Records? And I said, yeah, please.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong on the timeline here, but I think it was somewhere around this time that you also made another pretty important connection in your life. You'd meet Doug Crider, who you ended up marrying, and obviously he's a great songwriter and wrote some of your music too. Was that about this time that you met Doug?
Yes, yeah. In fact, Dolly was so cool. She wanted us to each have something to sell in the park, a piece of music or something, and so she allowed us to make our own tapes. Back then we had cassette tapes. And so I hired some people in Nashville and took out a little loan and made a record that I sold down there. And that's actually the thing that got onto the desk of somebody at Capitol Records. But Dolly allowed us to sell our product there, took no cut of anything, and encouraged us to play original music along with the other music that we played at the park. She wanted us to be who we were, and gave us a great launching board. My husband was writing songs for Warner Brothers, and he was the engineer when I was doing all the demos. So I played volleyball with him. I didn't know that he had a crush on me, but I recorded one of his songs on that tape. And he came to the session, when I recorded his song, and and he kind of just never left. So, yeah, it was definitely. I married him 5 days after Hollywood's first season closed.
Wow,
and it was pretty magical.
That's awesome, and he still never left. He helped me set up this interview.
That's right. He's hanging in there. 36 years now we've been married, so he's hanging in.
Congrats to you both. That's fantastic. So you talked about that debut album there with Capitol called Somewhere Between, which is that a Merle song, Merle Haggard?
Yes, it is. Yeah, just like one of his really classics. Back in 1968, he had a duet with his then wife, Bonnie Owens, who, I don't know if you know that she was married to Buck Owens first, and then she was in Merle's band, and then married Merle, and then they broke up, and she was still in the band.
Oh, I did not know that.
That's just, and then he was married to somebody else, but the background singer was still Bonnie. So
wow,
it's crazy stuff. And I've just been a huge fan of his ever since I was a little girl.
He's amazing. Most people I talk to list him as like their number one influence.
It's hard not to, because it really, as much as you think of him as a country icon, he also he experimented a lot with different instruments and bringing in little bits of swing and other kinds of music. And I mean, he was kind of brave, the styles that he mixed together that worked, and so, you'll hear some songs from like the 80s that almost sound like they got jazz undertones,
That's what's amazing about him. He's kind of known for being in that Bakersfield sound, but he was a transplant to California from Oklahoma, so he really had a mix of everything going on. But to be known as a pioneer in the Bakersfield movement, despite all that, I think is really cool.
Also, I just think that he was the kind of person that also was a fan of other artists and musicians, and somehow I think that's how he kept himself open to experimenting and to, as a writer, he's unbeatable, because he would just hone down to where he took every extra word out so that you just got the meat of that song and the feelings and the, how the notes fit with the lyric, everything was just so perfect. But I feel like in the studio, I think he really was a pioneer there.
I 100% agree. So that album, Somewhere Between, the most commercially successful single from it was Cross My Broken Heart. Would you say that was your breakthrough single, or did that come later?
Well, Somewhere Between was a hit in, like, some regions. I don't know if you remember this time, but there used to be a thing where, like, local stations could break a song. Mm-hmm. And, like, Somewhere Between went number one in Charlotte and some other, like, Houston and some different places, just because there was some association with the song or whatever it was. For some reason, they just played it a lot. So it ended up going up there. Individual charts. It only went to 46 on the regular chart, but it also earned me that ACM award, and then Cross My Broken Heart came out after that. So I think I already had a little, it kind of greased the wheel for me, to get things started. But, it's written by a couple of close friends of mine, Verlin Thompson and Kai Fleming, and I was there when Verlin cut the demo because my husband was the recording engineer. So I got to hear it before anybody else. And I just lapped that thing up. I loved it.
You mentioned the ACM for Top New Female Artist. That was 1989. Dream come true to be able to earn something like that?
Oh, yeah. I totally did not expect it. I was total goofball. You just... like I went to make my little, speech after they gave me the award, and I looked down, and straight in front of me was Roger Miller and Alabama and these, huge people that I've been watching on TV all my life, you know, and I was just like, oh my God, this can't be true. And no words would come. You know, it was like, duh, duh, duh.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Before we move on from that album, I wanted to point out one other song that I absolutely love from that album, and it's a Jerry Jeff Walker song. You talked about your yodeling. It's on full display in this one, Night Rider's Lament.
Glenn, I still sing that song every single day. I sing it in not every day, but every day that I'm performing. It's in my show. It's in my set. I've been singing it since I started driving across the country and playing in the ski resorts. The honest truth is I picked up the cassette tape at a truck stop for like 88 cents or something. It was in a cutout bin. And I had always kind of loved the cowboy way and all that stuff. And I had this big long drive all the way out to Wyoming, and I just taught myself to yodel while I was driving along. And I worked with some local ranchers out there in this little tiny place in a little tiny town that only had 50 people in it. And those rancher guys, you know, kind of like they warmed me up to the whole idea of having the harmony and all that stuff on the side. So it's a highlight in my show. Even when I've been out performing with Kathy Mattea the last year and a half, we even do Night Riders in that set. So,
do you do it together?
We do it together. We do everything together in our show. But I'm trying to teach her how to yodel. She's reluctant, but she's playing along like a nice friend.
I've had her on the show before. She was absolutely wonderful.
She's a doll.
We actually do a segment. We call it our cover song of the night. And I've actually done Night Rider's Lament before. But, you know, we'll play the original and compare it to the covers that have come along since. So Garth Brooks had a cover as well on his, I think it was the Chase album. So lots of people have done that song, but nobody's sung it quite like you, I don't think.
Well, Nancy Griffiths also did it.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of those 5 years that I spent out west traveling around. I met a lot of performers. You know, Chris Ledoux was huge out there during that time, and you know, because he was a rodeo guy, and you know, a lot of the places that I played were you know, cowboy hangouts. And so not only that song, but there's another song that was written by a fellow named Chuck Pyle from Iowa. It's called The Other Side of the Hill, and that's another song that Chris Ledoux used to always do. I pulled it into my set, and then I found out that the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band had cut it. So when I cut it, I had the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band sing the harmonies on it. So it just like, you know, music can be like that. It's got a real networking vibe to it.
The Other Side of the Hill. I'm going to check that one out. I don't know if I've heard it.
Yeah, it's a great song. It's, you know, it's just it's a good sing along.
All right, so let's go to the Aces album now. So we talk a little bit about commercial success. Well, it would definitely come with this album, 4 hit singles. Did this one kind of change everything for you? Did the landscape change after that?
Totally. Yeah. When Aces came out, you know, my just every, you know, all the opportunities kind of just started presenting themselves. You know, again, this is like 3 years later, but I won the Horizon Award. Mm-hmm. I was still new, even 3 years later. And so that, I think, too, that at that point, I really knew who I was as a singer and as someone who was choosing their material, that, you know, like the part of me that was trying to engage with my audience and how I could really kind of set myself apart. Because at that time, I'm sure you know, in the early 90s, there were so many of us, and a lot of us had kind of mixed influences, different styles of music that are kind of, you know, from, like, in my case, you know, my siblings were a bit older than I was. So, you know, I was listening to my sister's music and my brother's music and kind of getting, you know, a little bit of their taste in my stuff too. Plus my parents. My dad was the country fan. My mom was the big band person. So all that stuff kind of came together and melted into my love for singer-songwriters, which is what Aces was so. It was the epitome of my favorite songwriters, and I think I only had one song on there that I even wrote. I can't remember for sure. Yeah, I think one song. So it was all my favorite songwriters.
Well, the first single, "Someday Soon," which might be our cover song of the week this week. I don't know, because you've covered a few, but that one was from the '60s, and it had been done a few times already before you picked it up, right?
Oh, absolutely. I remember listening to Judy Collins sing it. Somebody I think on my dorm floor had that. They had that album,
mm-hmm.
and so and like I said, I have this infatuation with the whole cowboy lifestyle thing, and I maintain it to this day. I still do a lot of cowboy poetry gatherings, and I yodel every night. So I just can't help myself. I just kind of that dreamy world of the cowboy vision is still in my brain.
You talked about Nancy Griffith earlier. She wrote a song that you put on that album, too, "Outbound Plane," which is one of my favorites of yours. We talked with Kathy Mattea about Nancy a little bit because she wrote "Love at the Five and Dime" for Kathy, but she wrote this one, "Outbound Plane." Such a great song.
It is such a great song, and it's so fun to sing. But if you knew Nancy, you would really, really get a kick out of it because, she had a real sweet little voice when she talked, and she had actually been a kindergarten teacher before she got into songwriting full time, and so she would have this really sweet side of her, but she also was really salty. So for me, "Outbound Plane" is it's this really happy sound and upbeat thing, but if you listen tight to the lyric, you find out that she was actually pretty pissed off.
Yeah. Yep, I would agree with that. I just watched the music video for that last night. It had been a long time since I'd seen it. I wanted to go and revisit it, and I just loved it. Good imagery in that.
Oh, those guys did such a great job. And Robert Deaton, does the award shows now. This was back when he was just a youngster and, just kind of getting started and even in the video business. And I did quite a few videos with them. I did one with Chet Atkins, where we had dancers and the whole shindig, and Deaton Flanagan is the name of the group, and they still rule Nashville as far as I'm concerned, as far as having the aesthetics.
Let's go to the next single from Aces, and that would have been the title track, another one that made the top 10 for you. What do you remember about recording Aces?
Aces was a big deal, and here's the reason. It's the fellow who signed me to my record deal was no longer the head of the label, and a new guy came in named Jimmy Bowen. And when Bowen came in, I was kind of like on the cusp. I think he was kind of going, I don't know if I hear it. I don't know if I understand her, who she is. And so we tried to do an album together, and it just really didn't click. I mean, I don't even think they released a single out of it. And so at that point, I was, I knew I was either going to fall into the black hole of not getting to record anymore, and they would just kind of shift me down the pipeline, or I could go in and stand up for myself. And so I got Bowen on my side by basically having a heart-to-heart with him about, if he really wanted to, feel like he'd given me my just due, he needed to bring me some songs. And he pitched me that song. And it was that was when he and I understood each other, and we finally made a bond, and we made a lot of really good records together. So that song was pretty pivotal, I think, for my career.
I bet that could be tough when you're on a label and then the people who brought you in leave. I would compare it to like if you're on a football team and the coach that drafted you leaves and then a new regime takes over. You kind of don't know where you stand, right?
It's totally like that. And, it's, the people who bring you in are the people who really are championing for you. And when, all of that has shifted and a whole new group comes in, you're sort of the leftovers, And so you have to find a way to, just, like I said, bond, just find a way that they can feel like, okay, I can work with this. I understand this person now, and I actually care.
The last single from Aces, and according to the Billboard chart, the highest charting single from it was Letting Go, another one that was written or co-written by your husband, Doug Kreider. Right.
Yeah, that song I fought for a long time. I tried to put it on 2 other records before that, and it just seemed like it would always get pushed to the back. But when we were cutting Aces, we had about 2 or 3 hours left of the musician's time that we had already paid for. And so I asked Bowen if I could please cut it. And, I said, you don't have to put it on the record if you don't like it, but can we just cut it and see what comes out? And afterwards everybody was going, oh yeah, that's real. It ended up being on 2 albums, actually. So, because between the time when the single released, I had another album that I was getting ready to release. So they just put it on both albums.
Okay. So 1992, let's recap, because this is a huge year for you. I think it was like
a big one.
4 top 10 singles and the CMA Horizon Award all in 1 year.
Yeah, but it was not bad. It was not bad.
Next one I wanted to talk to you about is I think it's my favorite song of yours. It's between this and Outbound Plane is Drive South, which would have came off of Voices in the Wind. But another one that came out early or late, I guess, in 92, and it is your highest charting single. What do you remember about Drive South?
I remember fighting for this one too, because the Forrester sisters and the Bellamy brothers, believe it or not, did a duet of this song. Mm-hmm. And it came out, I think, around 1989 or so. And so the radio promotion people were reluctant to release it as a single because they thought maybe people would be drawing comparisons or something like that. But, I mean, my version was completely different. I mean, theirs was a duet with about 7 people.
Yeah.
It was quite a bit different than mine. And so I remember that Bowen was in Hawaii and the record label guys were in Nashville. My manager was in Denver and I was in New York. And we had a group phone call, like all 4 of us, and I just leaned on it and just said, because my manager and the promotion guys were kind of reluctant, and when I just said to Bowen, I just think they're being chickens. I think that they need to release this. It's gonna kick, and finally Bowen says, well, if she's believing in it, and we'll give her enough rope to hang herself. So they did release it, and I was right. It was a big hit. It's a fun song.
Sounds like you really did stand up for yourself when you needed to.
I did. Yeah. I did. That doesn't always work in your favor, but yeah, it was that one I got listened to.
When I saw that Drive South peaked at number 2 on the Billboard chart, I dug into it a little further. I was like, how was that not a number 1? And then I realized the early 90s was a really good time for women in country music, because the song that kept it out was another woman, Lori Morgan's What Part of No, which also was a great song.
I love that song.
Yeah.
I love Lori Morgan, and I'll tell you what, there was a time when it felt like the powers that be or whatever were kind of trying to keep us apart, all of us females, kind of pitting us against one another. And I will tell you that, it was, it wasn't easy, but we girls just said, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to be mad at each other because we can't get our record up the chart. Mm-hmm. And so you'll notice that so many of the female artists love to travel and participate and play music together. I mean, I've been singing with my gal pals for many, many years, doing tours and collaborations and all that stuff. But so I don't care if she got to be number one. You know, I'm number two. I tried harder.
Well, and you gals set the stage for what would come later. The sound might have changed for women in country music in the late 90s and into the 2000s, but there certainly was an explosion, and I think it all kind of started with you ladies in the early 90s kind of setting that stage for everybody.
Well, there, you know, like I said, there was enough of definition between each one of us as far as our artistry and our styles, that I think it was kind of easy to say, no, I like this girl, I like this girl, I like this girl. Now, there are times when I could go back to you and say that people mixed Patti Loveless and I up. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like they would ask me, you know, to autograph something that was like a song of Patty's. And I'd be like, and I don't know, maybe she had the same experience. Kathy said she had that experience happen to her a couple of times too, you know, where somebody would get her confused with somebody else. And but for the most part, I think we all were kind of, you know, we came from different parts of the country, and just, I don't know, I just felt like a really good open door for all of us.
Change the page of the calendar to 1993. A couple more big ones would come out. We'll start with Just Like the Weather. Suzy, what can you tell me about that one?
Well, I wrote that with Doug. I wrote that with my husband one afternoon when we were on the way to a wedding, and we were having lunch and discussing all of our friends that were getting divorced. And there was just something in the whole strange thing of being ready to go to a wedding, but talking about all of our divorcing friends. And it just kind of popped out. I think, one of us probably said something like, I don't know, everybody just changed, like the weather, you know, and all of a sudden it was off and running. And they talk about songs that were written on a napkin. Well, this one was written on a napkin. So there's that.
And talking about amazing women in country music, the next one, Hey Cinderella, was one that was co-written with Matresa Berg. For those who don't know, Matresa wrote Strawberry Wine for Dina Carter and so many other great songs. Yeah,
Matresa's she's just a songwriting machine. She's unbelievable. She's so prolific and such a wonderful character, such a beautiful soul as well. And that was the first song we wrote together. We've written lots and lots of songs together since then, but it was kind of a getting to know you kind of song. And she had it in her head that I was a real kind of goody two shoes, and as we got to talking and drinking coffee and getting all pumped up, we just all of a sudden were getting real mean with the little Cinderella. And it was like we went from like not knowing each other to I totally get you. If you knew what some of the edited lines were that it took out about Cinderella's thunder thighs and stuff, you would. You would appreciate the fact that we edited it down to try to make it, that it wasn't just totally a funny song.
1993 was just almost as big as 1992, because also that year you appeared in the Women of Country CBS special, which I watched again not too long ago, actually, when I was preparing for another interview. The roster.
How does it hold up?
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed it. The roster for that special was incredible.
Yeah, it sure was. It was a lot of fun, and we just had such a blast. I haven't seen it in a very, very long time, but every once in a while, one of the videos of singing with Mary Chapin will pop up, like in my memories or something like that, and I can't help but watch it and just think about how much joy was in all of us right then to be able to be singing together. It was really very, very special.
And you talk about continuing to tour with some of these artists to this day. So you're a part of that Chicks with Hits tour, right? That goes out with Terry Clark and Pam Tillis?
Yeah. Yep. Yes, we have a blast. It's just the three of us on stage. And so Pam plays some bass, I play some drums, Terry plays some lead, and we do 3-part harmony on each other's hits. So it's just the entire show, it's just hits. And it's really, it's a lot of fun. It's like, I can't even believe that I get a paycheck for doing that because it's so much fun.
It's hard to pick one, I know, but and you can mention a few names, but who are some of your favorites from your time, male or female, from your heyday? I mean.
Oh, wow, so many. I mean, really, honestly, so many of them are not just great artists, but they're also my friends. People that I have dinner with all the time, but, of course, Matrace and I are very tight. Kathy Mattea and I are very tight. Now that Pam and Terry and I have toured together for 4 years, they're my sisters. So Lori Morgan is another example. I love Winona. The guys, so many. Steve Warner's a really close friend. When I think back on just voices that killed me, Joe Diffie was one of my faves as far as just what a voice and great songs too, I don't know. There's just, it's like it was a big class, Alan Jackson always kept it right in the center, where he was a little bit tongue-in-cheek and a little bit, just soulful, heartful, country. Just there's so many of them. I can't really. Yep. I could just go through it and name them all.
I'd say you answered the question adequately.
Okay, good.
And yeah, Alan in particular, just he knew what he liked. He knew what his sound was, and it was true to that throughout his entire career.
And he still does that, now, even when he writes new songs, you just feel he knows who he is.
Well, as we get ready to wrap up this interview, Suzy, I appreciate you for spending so much time with me. I want to remind folks once again that May 13th is the concert at the Marion Cultural and Civic Center. We are so much looking forward to having you out. K103FM.com. You can still get there and purchase tickets. I believe some tickets still remain available. But you have so many fans that are still in our area that still request your music to this day. Is there anything you wanted to mention or say to them before we do let you go?
Yeah, well, bring out your moms, or if you're a mom, ask your husband or your kids or somebody to bring you to the concert. I'll sing Letting Go for you, and we'll all cry together.
That sounds like some sad fun.
There's a lot of laughs, believe me.
We have a liner on the show that says, classic country music, songs that make you feel good by making you feel sad.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. Oh.
Suzy, thank you so much for your time today. It's meant a lot to us.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Glenn. I appreciate you helping me get the word out about our show and taking an interest in, what's going on in the world.